A cult, as defined by OMF Canada, is an unorthodox, deviant religious group that is devoted to a person, thing, or set of ideas. People who join cults are often dissatisfied with the world or unsure of their place in it. Characteristics of these groups include a strong leader, revelations, apocalyptic visions, and the use of scripture from an established religion, new or revised doctrine, control and rules, indoctrination, isolation, close friendships, and false teaching or prophecy. The Church of Jesus Christ Restored. There are a number of religious groups that share a name with this church throughout the states. However, they don't have any relation to one another other than the name. In Chatsworth, Ontario, Canada, the Church of Jesus Christ Restored was founded in the late 1960s by Stanley M. King, and the church is currently led by his son, Fred King, following the death of his father. The group reportedly has under 40 members, which is down from a higher amount of around 8. Stan formed his church, offshoot of the already established religion, the Reorganized Church of Latter-day Saints, and his followers call him the Prophet. Stan King, as a prophet, was privileged to having multiple wives, women who were supposed to bear him special sons, princes to carry forth his teachings. He had multiple wives, some as young as age 10. Stan died at the age of 58, and following his death, his followers gathered around his body and prayed for the prophet's resurrection. A week went by, and one cult member, Carol, said that the stench became so putrid that finally, without a ceremony, his remains were put into the ground. Fred King, Stan's son, who soon took over, would later be faced with several lawsuits from former members. Members are quoted as saying Fred emotionally brutalized them by systematically creating an atmosphere of fear, which was used to prop up absolute obedience to a ruthless tyrant. In April 2014, after a 16-month police investigations, authorities charged King and his brother, Judson, with 31 counts dating from 1978 to 2008 of abuse. 12 Tribes has multiple sects in Canada, but was founded by Albert Eugene Spring in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1922. The founder decided he was designed to restore the ancient 12 tribes of Israel and produce an army of 144,000 male virgins who would pave the way for the second coming of Christ. The group has 25 communities ranging in size from 30 to 120 on 4 continents. The group has been accused of preaching child abuse and is a fairly isolated group, with one ex-member saying in an interview that they were regularly beaten by adults in the commune as a form of discipline, and that the first time they used an ATM or a vending machine was until after they left the group, saying they knew nothing about the outside world. This group has sects in Kingston, Ontario, and in Winnipeg. These groups run a restaurant called the Yellow Delis, which serve sandwiches. This next cult is probably the most vile and insane out of all the cults in Canadian history. In Burnt River, Roch Thériault led a small religious group known as the Anthill Kids between 1977 and 1989. Roch, or Roch, a self-proclaimed prophet who went by the name Moses, founded the doomsday cult in Quebec based on the already established religion of the Seventh-day Advent Church. He would later move his teachings to northern Ontario's wilderness to avoid the inevitable doomsday. He formed his group with the intention to save himself and his followers from the coming apocalypse. He has been described as an intelligent and persuasive man. However, the so-called prophet got a reputation of being so vile and disgusting by some of his practices. In one instance, he asked his followers if anybody was experiencing any pain. One woman, by the name of Bolliard, was experiencing stomach pains. The prophet punched her in the stomach and then gave her a crude emena with molasses and olive oil. He then sliced open her abdomen with a freshly sharpened knife and ripped off a piece of her intestines with his bare hands. After he asked a follower by the name of Gabrielle Lavelle to stitch her up. The next day, Bolliard died in a very intense agony. She was not the only victim of Roch's surgeries, as others lost limbs, teeth, fingers, and toes to his practices. The prophet, in addition to this, in other instances, Roch killed 2 of his children, one of which he murdered during a failed circumcision, and the other who he left outside in the middle of a blizzard. The prophet's followers lived under strict rules. They were unable to contact their family. Members weren't allowed to speak to one another without their leader present. Their prophet would become enraged if someone would leave, and he would hit them with belts or hammers, or suspend them from the ceiling, or he would pluck each and every hair from their body individually. If his members were not working hard enough, he would force them to break their own legs with sledgehammers. He also had members shoot each other in the shoulders. He forced members to eat insects and rats. He would nail children to trees and force other children to throw rocks at them. And then he would forcibly remove teeth and nails. He would burn his followers by making them sit on lit stoves. He would cut off arms and legs without warning, and he made people sit naked in the cold and whip and beat them. In addition to this physical abuse, he was also accused of sexually abusing some of his 26 children that were beared by his multiple concubines. As a prophet, he foretold that the world would end in 1979, and as you may be aware, it did not. 1979 came and went, but the world did not. The prophet explained this away by saying our world and God's world run on different time zones. But the prophet's saddest ways would eventually come to an end. After amputating a part of a follower's breasts and smashing her head in with an axe, Gabrielle finally mustered up the strength to flee and contact the authorities. Prior to this incident, she had endured multiple violent acts at the hand of the prophet, including having her arms amputated with a hunting knife. The prophet was arrested in 1989 and given a life sentence. However, his sentence was cut short in 2011 as he was murdered by his cellmate, who referred to him as a piece of shit. Brother 12. All were mesmerized by Brother 12's metaphysical outpourings and his promise that they were the chosen to save mankind from impending calamity, and had given him their life savings and complete control over their lives. In April 1933, 6 years after he founded the colony, Brother 12, at one time an express clerk in Victoria, BC, left his people with an estimated $500,000 of their money, mostly in gold coins sealed in 143 pint-preserving jars. Brother X was a sailor and mystic in touch with the ancient spirits from ancient Egypt. Brother 12 believed in this as he said he saw an ancient Egyptian symbol appear to him as he lay sick in his bed and was visited by vivid ancient spirits who addressed him as a pharaoh. He would later go on to say he was Oriasis, the Egyptian god of fertility and agriculture. Following this, he wrote a paper on his experience, which was published in England. Keep in mind that the tomb of King Tut was discovered in 1922, just a few years before this, and Egyptology and all that had to do with the culture caused much excitement throughout the world. Brother Twelve's paper was received well, and he gained a large following, who he later brought with him to BC to form a self-sufficient commune near Nanaimo. His goal? To create a self-sufficient community, independent of the outside world. This land was acquired largely through the donations of a wealthy socialite named Mary Connolly from Asheville, North Carolina. Now, after grueling manual labor, and were being whipped by the brother's leading lady, Madame X, who is described as a sadist and a dominatrix. As Brother X became more paranoid about the outside world, he had women patrol the land with rifles to protect the millions of dollars in gold times and the people who lived on the island. After some time under Brother X's control, fed up with his ways, some of the followers escaped and contacted authorities. A trial against the brother took place, accusing him of using his followers' funds for his own financial gain. The trial fell short, however, due to an event which gives the brother far more credibility as a prophet than any other cultist on this list. As during the trial, the jury and gallery began to pass out, and when the judge tried to recontrol order, he himself started growling like a dog, as the brother remained unaffected by these events, in fact, possibly the cause of the cause. In fact, the possible perpetrator of the chaos. These events resulted with a mistrial, which allowed Brother X with enough time to load up his boat with the gold and eventually flee to Switzerland. When his followers went to find the gold on the island under the floorboards of his cabin, they found no gold, but a note from the brother reading, "For traitors and fools, nothing." Brother 12 allegedly died in Switzerland 1 year after his disappearance, with many speculating that he faked his death to live in secrecy, thriving off the wealth of his followers. Brother X sightings did take place years after his death in San Francisco, and as his death certificate was signed by a former cult member, the death of this Oriasis reincarnated became even more stranger and suspicious.